Okay, so today we're going to dive into something that I think is going to be pretty relevant to a lot of our listeners.
Yeah.
We're talking about some upcoming changes to Australia's PBS.
The Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme.
Right, exactly.
Big news.
Yeah, and specifically, these changes are focused on women's health.
That's right.
So we're looking at a news article that came out on Saturday, March 15th.
Okay.
And we're really trying to break down, what does this actually mean for people?
Yeah.
Like are these changes actually going to make a difference in terms of accessing essential medications?
Yeah. Affordability and access are huge issues
Absolutely.
for so many people.
Yeah. So the three main areas that we're going to kind of zero in on are contraception,
Okay.
endometriosis treatment, and IVF.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack here.
There is.
And, hopefully we can kind of give everybody a good overview of what they can expect.
Yeah, because it sounds like some of these changes could really impact what you're paying at the pharmacy, potentially save you a lot of money.
Exactly.
So let's get into it.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about contraception.
Okay.
There's a new pill that's being added to the PBS called Slinda.
Slinda.
Yeah, have you heard of this one?
I have, actually. Yeah, it's a progestogen-only pill.
Right.
So that means it doesn't contain estrogen, which can be really important for some women who can't take estrogen.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So this is really good news.
Yeah, and the article says that this could benefit over 100,000 Australian women each year.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people.
Yeah, so definitely something to pay attention to if you're, looking at your contraceptive options.
For sure, for sure.
And, the potential savings here are pretty substantial.
Okay.
Because without this PBS subsidy,
Right.
Slinda could cost over $250 a year.
Wow.
So that's a big chunk of change, and that's just for 1 year.
Right.
So over time, those savings really add up.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So if Slinda's a good option for you, this PBS listing is going to make a big difference.
But when does that actually kick in?
So Slinda will be on the PBS from May 1st.
Okay, so coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, just a couple months away.
Okay, and I think this is interesting too.
What's that?
So Slinda isn't the only contraceptive pill that's been added to the PBS recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So apparently Yaz and Yasmin were also added.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it seems like there's, maybe a bit of a trend here towards providing more subsidized options.
Yeah, it seems like there's a growing recognition that, contraception should be affordable.
Right.
It's an essential part of healthcare for a lot of women.
Absolutely.
And it shouldn't be a financial burden.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so moving on, we've got endometriosis treatment.
Okay.
Another area where there's going to be expanded support through the PBS.
Okay.
And this one's called Ryeqo.
Ryeqo.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
So Ryeqo is a treatment for endometriosis pain, and it's going to be listed on the PBS also starting May 1st.
Okay.
So just to give some background for anyone who might not be familiar with endometriosis,
Yeah.
it's a condition where tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside of the uterus,
Right.
and it can cause a lot of pain.
Yeah, I've heard that it can be incredibly painful.
Yeah, it can be debilitating,
Right.
and it can also affect fertility.
Okay.
So it's a really serious condition.
Yeah, and actually the article says that up to 1 in 7 Australian women are believed to have endometriosis.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's really common.
Yeah, it's a lot more common than people realize.
Yeah, so for all those people who are dealing with this condition,
Right.
Access to affordable treatment is just so important.
Absolutely.
So tell me about this Ryeqo. How much does it cost now, and how much will it cost once it's on the PBS?
Okay, so right now, Ryeqo can cost up to $2,700 per year
Wow.
without the subsidy.
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And, this is a chronic condition.
Right.
So people are dealing with this pain long term.
So they could be paying that every year.
Exactly.
Wow.
So this PBS listing could really make a huge difference.
Yeah, so they could go from paying, thousands of dollars a year to just whatever the standard PBS copayment is.
Right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's a game changer for a lot of people.
For sure. And I think this is also interesting to note that this isn't the first endometriosis drug that's been added to the PBS recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so apparently the first one in 30 years was listed last year.
Wow.
Yeah, so it seems that there's some momentum building here.
Yeah, it's good to see that this condition is finally getting some attention.
Right.
And that access to treatment is improving.
Absolutely.
But there's also an interesting perspective that I think is worth considering.
Okay.
It comes from the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners.
Okay.
And they're pointing out that while Ryeqo is being marketed as a new treatment,
All right.
its active ingredients have actually been used for other conditions for many years. Yeah, so it kind of raises the question of, what does new really mean in the pharmaceutical world?
Right.
And how does that impact cost and accessibility?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because sometimes what's presented as a brand new breakthrough is actually a repurposing of an existing drug.
Right.
And that can have implications for how much it costs.
For sure, for sure.
So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a really good insight.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's move on to the third area, which is IVF medication.
Okay.
So there's a combination therapy called Pergoveris.
Pergoveris.
Yeah, and it sounds like there are some changes happening with that as well.
Yes, and this change is actually coming into effect a bit sooner than the others.
Okay.
So from April 1st,
Hello?
access to Pergoveris through the PBS will be expanded to women with specific low levels of reproductive hormones.
Okay.
And this is earlier in their IVF journey.
Okay, so previously, they may not have had access to this funding.
Right, so previously funding was often only available in later cycles. So this is a big change for women who are starting IVF.
Yeah, it sounds like it could be a really crucial medication for them.
Right, and if you have those specific hormone levels, this change means you can get access to this medication much earlier on.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's really important support at a very sensitive time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the cost savings here are significant as well.
Okay.
So the article says that 4 pens of Pergoveris could cost over $3,500 without the subsidy.
Wow.
That's a huge expense.
Yeah.
And that's just for 4 pens.
Right?
So this PBS expansion could really help to alleviate that financial burden.
That's fantastic.
And there's another change with Pergoveris as well.
Okay.
So the number of pens that you're allowed per script is being doubled.
Okay.
So it's going from 2 to 4.
Okay.
So if you need 4 pens for a cycle, you'll only have to pay the PBS copayment once instead of twice.
Oh, wow. That's even better.
Yeah, so that's going to lead to further savings.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a really positive change.
Okay, so it seems like across all 3 of these areas, contraception, endometriosis treatment, and IVF,
Yeah.
these PBS changes really could make a big difference for a lot of people.
Yeah, they have the potential to really ease the financial burden
Absolutely.
for women who are facing these healthcare costs.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting to kind of step back and look at the bigger picture here.
Yeah, what's the context for all of this?
Right, so the article includes some comments from the Health Minister, Mark Butler.
Okay.
And he's basically framing these PBS listings as part of a much larger package of measures.
Right.
So he says that this is part of a $500 million package of women's health measures.
$500 million.
Yeah.
That's a serious investment.
It is a big investment.
Yeah.
And he's saying that this was actually announced back in February.
Okay.
And he's quite direct about what he sees as the purpose of these investments.
Okay.
He's saying that it's intended to address decades of inaction and neglect in women's health.
Wow. That's a strong statement.
It is a strong statement.
Yeah.
But, it kind of shows that there's a potential shift happening
Right.
in terms of government focus and funding priorities.
Yeah, it seems like they're trying to make up for lost time,
Right.
really prioritize women's health.
Yeah. And he also talks about the potential for these changes to provide long-term financial relief.
Okay.
He says that these listings could save women and their families thousands of dollars across their lifetimes.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then he makes this really interesting statement.
Okay.
He says, these investments really reflect our determination to keep improving options for women who face a whole lot of significant lifetime costs in health. Not because they're sick, always, but often because they are women.
That's an important point
Yeah.
because it's highlighting the fact that there are certain healthcare costs that are just inherently linked to being female, like
Well,
contraception.
Right.
And
Well,
doing-
pregnancy, childbirth, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And those costs can really add up over a lifetime.
Yeah. So it seems like these PBS changes are trying to address that specifically.
Yeah, it's a targeted approach to improving women's health.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so we've heard from the government,
Right.
but the article also includes comments from the Shadow Minister for Health, Ann Rustin.
Okay. What does she have to say about all of this?
So she welcomes the announcement,
Okay.
but she also says that these changes should have happened sooner.
Okay, so she agrees that they're good changes, but
But she thinks they're overdue.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And she also kind of emphasizes the coalition's commitment to women's health.
Okay.
And she says that they have a long-standing policy of listing all PBJC recommended medicines on the PBS and in a timely manner.
Okay, so basically she's saying that if they were in government, this would have already happened.
Yeah, that's the implication.
Okay.
But, it's interesting because it seems like there's agreement across the political spectrum.
Right.
that these are important measures.
Yeah, they both agree that these medications should be affordable and accessible.
Right.
They just maybe disagree on the timeline.
Yeah, the timing of it,
Right.
but the underlying principle is the same.
Yeah. And she also really emphasizes the need for affordable access to medications.
Yeah, especially with healthcare costs being so high right now.
Right.
That's a really important point.
Absolutely.
Okay, so one other thing that I found interesting in the article,
Okay.
it talks about the cost of all of this.
Right.
Like, how much is this actually going to cost the budget?
Yeah.
And apparently they're not disclosing the exact amount.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why not?
So the article says that a spokeswoman for Minister Butler said it's due to commercial confidentiality agreements
Okay.
with the pharmaceutical companies.
So basically, they can't reveal how much they're paying for these drugs.
Right. Right.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it's pretty standard practice in these kinds of negotiations.
Right.
You know, they need to protect the commercial interests of the companies involved.
Yeah, for sure.
So we know it's a significant investment.
Right.
And we know it's going to benefit a lot of women,
Yeah.
but the specific figures are confidential.
Okay, fair enough.
And the last little detail from the article is that Health Minister Mark Butler was actually scheduled to make a formal announcement about all of this
Right.
in Adelaide on Sunday,
Okay.
which would have been the day after the article was published.
Right.
So by the time people are listening to this, that announcement has already happened.
Right.
So there might be even more detail out there now.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
Okay, so to sum it all up,
Yeah, let's bring it all together.
we've got some pretty significant expansions to the PBS coming up.
Specifically for women's health.
Exactly.
Right.
So starting May 1st, we've got a new contraceptive pill, Slinda,
Right.
and a new endometriosis treatment, Ryeqo.
Which could potentially save people thousands of dollars a year.
Thousands.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it is.
And then from April 1st, there's expanded access to Pergoveris for IVF. And that includes, earlier access for some women and the doubling of the number of pens per script,
Right.
which could also lead to significant savings.
Absolutely.
So yeah, a lot of positive changes happening.
Yeah, it's great to see.
And it seems like this is all part of a broader shift towards greater attention to women's health.
Right. Addressing those decades of neglect that the health minister talked about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while there might be some political differences in terms of, how quickly these changes should have been made,
Right.
it seems like there's general agreement that these are important medications
Absolutely.
and that they should be affordable and accessible for everyone who needs them.
Yeah, that's the key takeaway.
Yeah, for sure.
So as you're listening to this, think about how these changes might affect you or someone you know.
Yeah.
Could these PBS listings provide greater access to treatment
Right.
or help to alleviate some of the financial burden and, maybe even do some more research on those medications? See if they might be right for you.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth thinking about, what are the other areas of women's health that still need attention?
That's a good point.
What are the gaps that still exist in terms of access and affordability?
Yeah, what are the next steps that need to be taken
Right.
to really ensure that women are getting the health care that they need
Yeah,
without having to worry about the cost?
that's a great point.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good note to end on.
thanks.
It's a good reminder that there's always more work to be done.
Absolutely.
But these PBS changes are definitely a step in the right direction.
For sure.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
I hope everyone found it informative.
And empowering.
Yeah, exactly.
Take care.
All right. See you later.
Yeah.